Well, let's go to the money desk. Devon Murgan standing by.
So, Dev, Nedbank has some good profits to talk about, and you have the CEO, Mike Brown.
Yes, indeed, I do, Shahan, as Nedbank posts a 178% rise in annual profits. How much of that is connected with any recovery in the consumer and the economy? Well, Mike Brown, as you say, is with us this evening. Mike, thanks indeed for your time. The past 2 years, in your words, had been extraordinarily difficult for the bank and its clients. It seems people are paying back the debts and loans somewhat better than expected, Mike. Is that part of the reason why you had a good showing today?
Absolutely, and good evening, everybody. 2020 was certainly an extremely difficult year for our customers and for the bank, as the lockdowns led to a dramatic slowdown in transactional activity and therefore transactional revenue. We had to take a forward-looking view of bad debts to try and estimate what those may be into the future, and at the same time deal with a very strong drop in interest rates. So the second quarter of 2020 was certainly the toughest part of that. And without doubt, the economy and our clients have bounced back faster than we expected, and that's enabled us to post over 100% earnings growth off that 2020 base.
And those results come on a day when we go into stage 4 power cuts. You've again made the point that economic growth is not at a rate it should be, because reforms are not happening fast enough. Mike?
That's quite right. You know, I think a very simple way of looking at this is, if we want job creation in South Africa, which is absolutely vital for our country, we have to have investment to drive growth, and job creation is a consequence of that. And investors look at emerging markets and they know that emerging markets are more risky, but in exchange for that higher level of risk, they want higher levels of growth. And unfortunately, if we only have the higher levels of risk without those higher levels of growth, that investment simply finds a home elsewhere. And as a result, our economy and our employment statistics suffer.
And I mean, you've made this point as well in an earlier interview. I see that, look, we've got those structural reforms in the renewable sector, for example, undergoing. But I heard you say earlier that, you know, the red tape is still there. So what sort of a difference does it really make, is it?
That's correct. You know, we've definitely made some progress. So our country today is definitely better off than it was several years ago in terms of structural reform. We've come through the COVID crisis with government's finances, you know, in a difficult place, but better than where people thought they were going to be. But we're just still so much behind where we could be as a country if we had moved faster with renewable energy, if we'd moved faster with the rounds of embedded energy. And that's the challenge that I was talking to earlier. You know, people can now generate up to 100 megawatts, but there's still an extraordinary amount of red tape that they have to go through, which means it just takes too long for that electricity to hit the grid, and we end up with load shedding like we have today.
And the consumers, I mean, they want to move ahead despite the economic drag. And I would imagine your Money app is a case in point, because you've now got, what, 1.6 million active clients on that app. It goes to show that they don't want the drag, do they?
No, nobody wants the drag. It's not good for anybody. And, you know, certainly, you know, we've invested in the last few years nearly 10 billion rand in a complete refresh of our technology stack at Nedbank. And we see the benefits of that in something like the Money app, which is, you know, nearly got 2 million customers on it. In the last 2 years, the volume and value of transactions over our Money app is up about 160%. And off the back of that, we've launched Nedbank Avo, which is a one-stop shop where people can buy pretty much anything and make payments over secure banking rails. And within a year, we've just got to 1 million customers on that. So we can definitely see strong underlying pent-up growth in our retail-facing business.
Mike, I've got to ask you before you go about this bounce-back scheme that was announced by both the President and the Finance Minister, targeting small businesses. Now, we know what happened with that first loan scheme in the advent of COVID-19. Is government talking to you about that? I mean, what is Nedbank prepared to do in that regard?
So certainly we haven't engaged. I do believe the Banking Association has begun to engage. But as banks, we do not yet have the complete details of that scheme. We would clearly want to be active participants in it to the extent that our customers need whatever that financing solution is. And if I look back on the original loan guarantee scheme, I still think that one of the reasons the take-up was so low is because the banks themselves moved so quickly to help their customers in March, April, May, and June of 2020. So by the time the loan guarantee scheme arrived in July and August, pretty much every customer who needed help had already been helped by their banks. And actually, if you're a taxpayer in South Africa, that's actually a very good outcome because taxpayers' money was not put at risk in that period.
All right, we'll leave it there. Nedbank CEO Mike Brown, thanks very much indeed for those insights.